Welcome to Brave. Be inspired by the best leaders of Southeast Asia tech. Build the future, learn from our past, and stay human in between. I'm Jeremy Au, a VC, founder, and father. Join us for transcripts, analysis, and community at www.jeremyau.com. Hi, Anna. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Jeremy. Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm really excited to see you as a female founder, an operator, and someone who is just so determined to make things work in Southeast Asia. And I'm excited to share your story.
I'm also very excited to be here, considering that many times that we have to reschedule this because of COVID. So thank you.
So, Anna, could you share a little bit about yourself professionally?
I'm currently the partner and a CEO at ABZD Capital and Gourmet Food Holdings. So we are actually an investment firm focusing on opportunities in the F&B industry. What we do is we actually look for promising brands and we will invest in them and actually grow them to scale them globally. I also founded the New Savvy, which is Asia's leading financial investments and career platform for women. Our mission was to actually empower women to achieve financial happiness and to ensure that financial literacy is increased in Asia. I was also the part of founding committee for Singapore FinTech Association, and I was in charge of the Women in FinTech and Partnership Committee. I hold other roles and other positions, but we can speak about them later.
Awesome. And so I'm so curious, is like, where did this, entrepreneurship bug bite you? Was it like sometime back when you were a university student at Singapore Management University, or where?
No, actually, Jeremy, it's very strange, and I think even until today, after about 8 to 10 years, I still find it very unbelievable that I'm running businesses. When I was growing up, I only wanted to work in a corporate actually because my dad is Indonesian. We have a small family business, and I think his business failed during the financial crisis. So when I was growing up, it was always, I never had my parents around. I saw the way they suffered while running their businesses. I saw how the businesses failed. And I was like, there's no way I want to do it or run a business. I just want a stable job. I just want a stable salary, and yeah, that's all I want. I did pretty well in school. I was supposed to go to law school, but I decided at the last minute to actually go to Singapore Management University, SMU, and to study finance. What was amazing is I actually found out that later on that I really, really love finance, and finance is my first big and biggest love in my life. And what I really like about it is because due to my family financial situation, I realized that finance is actually an education in finance is an equalizer. I can actually make my money work harder for me, and I learned a lot of concepts that I thought were very relevant to real life situations. So just a background, like when I was 21, my family, we were living paycheck to paycheck and we were renting a small HDB flat. And at that point of time, I was really worried that we will get evicted out. And I felt very helpless, right? And I told myself, okay, and I was in class, I wasn't a very good student. And I thought to myself, okay, what do I want out of life, right? And I said, okay, I want to buy my family, my parents, a house, a home before I'm 30. I don't know why I have this, very strange and ambitious goal. Obviously, when you're young, you're just very naive. So I sat down there and in class, and I actually Googled how much does a HDB cost in Singapore. Obviously, I was astounded. It's almost 500,000, right, for a 3-4 bedroom of HDB flat. And I asked myself then, how can I, an ordinary 21-year-old, a very, very ordinary with no special talents, not, super smart, what can I do and how can I actually earn 500,000 in 9 years? Obviously, I didn't know that you can take loans and all this financial stuff. So I actually did a simulation of, how much I need to earn if I earn an average salary and how much. And I realized that it's it's really very hard to achieve all these financial goals if you don't save and if you don't invest, because your salary alone, I mean, an average person's salary will never help you to reach those goals. And I think that sparked my lifelong journey of, being in love with finance, my financial management journey. And throughout that, what happened was I actually joined a bank. I joined a few firms and finally was in private banking. So I was in wealth management and I really, really loved my job. And um, so that was the start of it. And what happened was just I was really just focused on saving money to buy my family home, my family HDB, and sorry, the screen went off. So I just continue, okay? Yeah. So after that, I was I was in banking for 10 years. And what actually made me left banking was because I had a lot of health issues. I was hospitalized twice. I had a few surgeries. And the final straw came when half of my face was paralyzed. So I couldn't even smile. I can't even close my eyes. I have to stick my eyes when I was sleeping. And I said, okay, you know what? I need to take a break. So this was about when I was 31. And I was planning to take a 6-month break to join a bank, to join a bigger bank actually. And during this time, what happened was um, I had a surgery and I was on 2 months MC, and I asked myself, you know what, I've been very blessed in this journey for so far, right? How can I use this to actually help other people? What have I learned in this 10 years that changed my life so dramatically, right? And what happened was I wanted to start a financial, and I realized something. I realized that financial literacy was lacking in Singapore, in Asia, in the world. I always said we are always forced to be good as Asians, right? We are always forced to be good in everything, in languages, in math, in technology, in everything. But nobody teaches us as kids how to manage money, how to have a healthy relationship with money, with debt, with credit cards. And when I look at my parents, I realized that there were so many mistakes that they could have avoided but didn't. And so I asked myself, why is financial literacy not, why don't we focus on financial literacy? What happened was I actually wanted to start a financial literacy classes for children. I had a business partner. So at the last minute, she actually had to withdraw herself due to her, family situation. So I went back to the drawing board and said, I'm not an educator. I'm not very patient. I can't teach for nuts. What is the most underlooked, what is the most underserved and overlooked market? And I realized it was women. And because traditionally financial firms, right, they have only targeted men. And we can talk more about this, the difference between men and women later. But I thought that if you educate women, where women are actually, learning more, going to school more, and getting more educated and have more money, you will actually empower generations and generations to come to actually have better financial habits and financial thinking. That was the start of my entrepreneurship journey.
Wow, what a crazy journey. And I think it's for so many, people in Southeast Asia. I think a lot of us have big memories of the Asian financial crisis, right? And how it impacted our parents. What was it like watching your dad go through those struggles as a kid? Did he talk to you about those problems, or was it something that you was implied by the way he was working? How was that like?
I think there was never a talk, but I guess children are very smart, right? I mean, not saying I'm very smart, but in general, children are very perceptive. I think I realized that, when my parents don't go to work, when at one point we were actually staying in a one bedder for four of us, in one bedroom for four of us. Um, I think when I was growing up, I always knew that I couldn't have all the luxuries that I wanted or that other children have. And if Jeremy, I'm not sure, I mean, you're much younger than me, but I'm not sure if you remember, it's not only the 1997 crisis, where my family was in Indonesia, and it was very harrowing because it was the riots, there was the racial riots, there was all this, and my family was right in the middle of it. But it's also the SARS crisis, the 2001 crisis. There was a few crises that actually hit Asia pretty hard, right? And I think for me, it was much when I was a bit slightly older, where also the impact hits on me. So for example, like I was a sports person, right? And um, I was in many different sports group when I was in school, and I don't know why I'm sharing this, but it's very strange. But I've always wanted a Nike sports bra, and I knew that we couldn't afford it. Small things like that, which I guess when you're growing up, you think, okay, you know what, I'm going to earn money to actually buy this myself next time. The more I think the more relevant one for me was when my mom had to take on credit card debt. Um, she took about 20,000 on, and as you know, when you take on a credit card loan, it's not the principal that kills you; it's actually the interest. And and yeah, and I know that being the oldest, I had to pay it off. Yeah, so these are the things that make me aware of it.
Wow. Do you feel like, I think some people are in the school of campus like, oh, tough times when you're a child makes you stronger. And other folks are like, maybe not, right? Like, do you feel like it's something that was weirdly beneficial, or was it something that ended up being just something you just had to get through, right? I don't know how you think about it on reflection. Yeah.
Well, I think for most part, okay, look, I think when you're a child, when you're a kid, right, you don't really resent the situation, not because just because you don't know any better. I mean, I've spoken about this with my friends, right? And when you're a kid, you're so innocent, I guess, and you're just like, okay, you know what? You don't really care about all this. I think the things happen when you're older and you wonder, like, okay, why am I mean, there was a point of time where I won't say I resent, but I will say like I was like, I wish this is not happening to me. So for example, I was supposed to go to Oxford to study law, and I just knew that we couldn't afford it, and I didn't want to take a scholarship. So small little things like this, where it's more about opportunities, I think, than material things that make me go. And I won't say that it makes you want to do better for yourself. I think for me personally, it has changed. I've never resented it, but it has made me think through a lot of things, and contemplate about them deeper. So for example, for children, for example, for me, because I never had all these opportunities, I always think, if I have a child, these are the things that I will want my kid to have. You know what I mean? I mean, you're a dad, right? So you should know this better than me.
Well, yeah, I get it. And, I didn't mention about it. I think my dad was also impacted by the Asian financial crisis, right? And I, as a kid, actually do remember him being very devastated by the whole, you know, crisis, right? And I too also had to downgrade my housing situation quite a few times during that period of time as well. But I wouldn't
Well,
necessarily.
how did it change you?
How did it change me? I think what happened was that my dad really didn't handle it well, and I don't think well in the sense of like not in a bad way, but just like it's not like the whole like positive psychology, growth mindset, bounce back, anti-fragile kind of way, right? I won't go too much into detail about it. And so it was tough on those two fronts, right? It was tough in the Asian financial crisis from an economic and financial basis, but I think it was also tough for my dad on a psychological basis, right? Which impacted me as a kid. And I think what was interesting was that growing up, I think I realized that I, to some extent, also had the same financial security dynamic of being very clear about what I needed to do differently. And in some ways, subconsciously replicated some behaviors of my dad, which I would later have to consciously unlearn. And also be thoughtful about how I was going to be different, right? And I think one thing I've realized is that in retrospect, when I think about it quite a bit more, one thing I've realized is that the Asian financial crisis happened when my dad was middle aged, right? And now I'm approaching that. Well, I think I am middle aged now. Let's just say that, right? So I'm actually approaching my dad's age, right, when he was dealing with financial crisis, and now I'm dealing with the 2020 pandemic, right? And what's interesting for both of us is that I think he's handled this pandemic situation in a way more resilient, constructive way, I think, compared to when he first faced it in his middle ages, right? And I too am confronting it in a different way than my dad did, right, for the Asian financial crisis, right? So I like to hopefully think about it as like both of us has grown, my dad from himself and me from watching my dad grow as well. So that's how I think about it, which is like the crisis itself, as well as like the individual reaction to that crisis. Yeah.
I think it's very interesting you say that because, like when I was younger, I think I'm very close to my parents. I think everybody knows that. But there is a part of me that that always thinks like I don't want to be like that. I don't want to make the same mistakes, right? But and I guess when I was growing up, there was a lot of reconciliation because I didn't grow up with my parents since I was 11 or 10. They were in Indonesia and I'm in Singapore, and I've always reflected back. And there were a lot of things that they did that I thought, you know what? My mom had me when she was 20. And I was like, okay, when I was 20, I think I was just partying and drinking myself silly in school, So, and you begin to think what life is and what life was for your parents, the type of experiences that they have. And I think as we grow older, we have a more keen sense and I guess an acceptance and also forgiveness towards the things that your parents did when they were at that age, right? Like you say, you are at the age where your dad faced financial crisis. So now that I guess now like you it's very interesting that you mentioned now that we are in 2020 pandemic, and I look back at my parents, and yeah, I guess it's very interesting how we, in your words, unlearn the subconscious things that we learn from our parents, and somehow we also there is a mean reversion to becoming them, or to try to be an improved version of them if we can.
Yeah, exactly. And right now there are children growing up, right, whose parents are going through the 2020 pandemic, and they are going to be thinking about this and reflecting on this, over the next 10 to 20 years. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
20 years later. Oh no, we are so old now. Now you make me feel
No
old.
lah. And I mean, I think that's a good conversation, right? It's like, what are the things that you learn and unlearn, right? And one of the things that you learned was the whole dynamic around, finance skills. And one of the things that you unlearned was, kind of like your feeling or, I guess, frustration or resentment, like you said, right? About, parents, and both of our growing understanding about who they were at this age, right? When they had us as kids. When you think about it, like you obviously have helped a lot of other folks, right, through their own like entrepreneurship and financial journeys as well. What are other things that you have seen that are important things to unlearn along the way?
Wow, if did a lot actually. I guess the first thing, and I have to give a disclaimer, not that I have not been that route, right? But I think one of the first things that I guess a lot of people are actually learning this during pandemic is I feel that as I grow older, and maybe this is a personal reflection more than others, is I think in Asia, people care a lot about material things, about face, about what you work as, where you work as, and all these things, right? Like the traditional markers of success. I have to say that okay, so it's a few things. So first, I will say that even when I started the New Savvy, and people even 1 year after, um, every day I was still asking myself, am I doing the right thing? What am I doing? I should be back in the corporate job. Why am I doing this, right? Especially, as you know, on a Sunday, if you're in office, I was looking at Robinson Road, and across the road, across the window, I can see people partying at Sofitel. I really go, and most of my friends are now middle management. They fly business class. Um, they stay in nice swanky hotels, and for the new savvy, I actually fly budget airlines and stay in a two-star hotel in Hong Kong. I think it was a love motel. I can't even open my luggage fully. You really ask yourself, I mean, I really actually ask myself questions like, what am I doing with my life? And I think the first thing I would like people to unlearn is that there will be a lot of expectations set on you for your life, on what you're supposed to be, on what success is. But you really, really need to have to think what they are for yourself, and you not need to go through the journey and the pain of realizing what makes you who you are and what makes you happy. I think what people don't realize enough is you can go through life doing the things that people expect you and still thrive, but at the end of the day, is that what you want to be doing? And I think in terms of finances, I will say that a lot of people go through life chasing one material things after the other. For example, like when you start work, right? It's very liberating. It's very empowering to have your first salary, your first paycheck. And a lot, what people do is normally they reward themselves. Especially in Asia, right? Women buy like, I don't know, Chanel bags, or like men buy watches. And I'm not against rewarding yourself, but I think it's very important to have a financial goal, because when you don't have one, you just spend it quite recklessly, or you just think, I work so hard for it, I deserve it. Whereas I think for me, because my journey is slightly different, I was so obsessed with buying that HDB for my family. I just had that one goal that I saved most of my money, I invested it, and I actually reached that goal earlier. I think I bought the first home at 28. And yeah, and I guess it's not about me, but it's more of, when I look back, I was very thankful that I had that goal, because if not, then I would have fallen into that trap of keeping up with appearances. So I guess to summarize, the first thing I will say is to unlearn what we are conditioned with, and to find out what your passions and your true journey that will make you happy is. And number two, to be financially conscious on your spending, on what you want, and on your financial goals.
Yeah, you mentioned the five C's, right? Which is, I think, a big dynamic for so many folks about, rewarding themselves, the materialism to reward, and obviously expenses rise pretty quickly. And what's interesting is that, you've not only managed to, of course, focus on, saving for your parents and everything, but also you've managed to do so not just with a conventional, banking career, but also as someone who's working on investments and the entrepreneurship side of it. So, are there any specific financial advice that you give to, people who want to be founders or set up something new?
Okay, I think my journey is a bit different, Jeremy, and I think it's a bit unfair if I just give an advice without having a background, right? I think I am not so now I think entrepreneurship is very in vogue. When I go back to SMU to give talks, or when I go back to any universities, everyone wants to be an entrepreneur, because they think that they're going to be the next Zuckerberg or next Bezos, right? They just think that it's this very rosy path to riches. But I always tell them, no, it's not. It's painful, and it's one out of 10,000 make it there, right? So I think for me personally, because I grew up in that culture and in that generation where people wanted to be investment bankers or consultants, or to work in corporate, and that's what I did for 10 years. When I turned or started the new savvy, where I will say that's my first venture into entrepreneurship, I was actually financial. I will say that I was financially very comfortable. I could afford not to work. I could afford to still provide for my family and still live a modest lifestyle, a very comfortable lifestyle. So I think for me, Whereas now, I think the founders, they start out of school, right? And you really struggle. You hear of people really like eating instant noodles, and I never had to do that. So I guess my view is that if you want to be a founder, it's good to consider your financial situation. And I'm talking about it in a purely, I guess, in a purely cold and very practical way, right? I think the best way to be a founder, if I had to restart my journey again, is to actually work a few years in a startup or in an area that I'm interested in, to learn to learn what needs to be done, to learn the culture and to all the skills that I need, save as much money as possible, and then try to do the startup while you are still in employment. Because you never, and once there's attraction, then you move into it full time. I think that is something I will do, um, if I was going to, start again. The problem with a lot of founders, I think, is that we are very in love with our own ideas. So if let's say today I wanted to start a clothing shop or a fashion tech platform, right? I'm so in love with it that I will overestimate how much people will love it or how much they will buy. But right, and normally we will say, oh, if I start this, people will start buying it because it's so awesome, right? There's no way you're not going to love my product. But the truth is, it's not. It's very hard to even get your first customer. It's very hard to get your repeat customers. And I think that's something that we always overestimate, especially as new founders. You just don't realize how hard it is. I think people don't know how difficult it is. I mean, you are a founder, right? I'm sure you know how difficult it is to even get the first dollar in.
Of course. And, isn't that interesting? Because I feel like I was given that advice by lots of folks and I totally disregarded them and I still went on anyway. So,
No, me too. Which is why it was so painful, right?
yeah, it's so painful. And then now we're going out telling people it's difficult, but they also don't listen.
Yeah, but as what we say, I mean, the truth is, I think the truth about entrepreneurship is it kind of weeds out. It's kind of a natural selection of, I guess, resilience, of mental strength, and a lot of luck, right? I mean, sometimes you can be doing all the right things and just at the wrong time, or you just don't have the luck. So,
Such is life, right? And I think you said something very true earlier on, right? Which is that it's also a probability dynamic, right? Or you can look at it as a portfolio, right, from the VC perspective, right? So from a founder, it's like, okay, 1 out of 10 of us is going to succeed, at some level, 1 out of 100 to really, really succeed. And then from a investor perspective, it's like diversification of portfolio risk, right? Which is that out of this portfolio of 100, one of these are going to win. But it's very different if you're looking at it from the macro view, right? Versus you being one of the 99 folks who doesn't make it due to luck or bad market fit or poor execution. So it's and I think you talk a little bit about that, right? That mismatch between the perceived reality of being a founder, especially from the new generation that's coming, versus the actual lived reality. So what do you think is driving that imagery or that perception gap?
I think there's a lot of glorification about the success stories, like Elon Musk, Jack Ma, Jeff Bezos, Zuckerberg, like all these people who, gave up a lot or dropped out of school and suffered, and they attained these unattainable riches, right? Unimaginable. But there are also a lot of people. I think one of it is that I think people don't talk about failures enough. I think, especially in Asia, right, you're not supposed to say how much you failed or like how you failed because it's such a disgrace. And I totally disagree with that, because if you don't talk about the failures, other people will never learn. They will make the same mistakes all over again and again, because the truth is most of us, we make the same mistakes, we face the same obstacles. I always believe in like hacking this, right? Like if you are not the smartest person, and I'm always not the smartest person, I try to find somebody who has done it and who has solved the problem, and ask them for guidance on how I can shorten my learning time. But also, I think the other part is I think you know I've been thinking about this a lot, and actually a friend of mine, Min Liang from Razer, told me this before. What kind of business do you want to build? Do you want to build a tech unicorn, or do you want to build a business that can give you a very comfortable sum every month to take home and a comfortable life, right? And there is no right and wrong. The thing is, I think because of the media and the way it's, we portray tech entrepreneurs or founders, people only have the idea that I need to be a unicorn, but not everybody can be a unicorn. Not everybody can be a Facebook. Not everybody can be a Grab, right? Some of us, we, you can have a small business, you can have a business that generates a healthy revenue, and that's fine, that's okay. That doesn't make you less of a founder, that doesn't make you less successful. But I think it's very worrying to me that people think that it's either it's like all one winner or not. And I guess that's one of the things um that I care about. I think the second thing is, of course, about making sure that I think to go into any journey, whether it's banking, whether it's consulting, or even medical, right? I think a person should always have all the necessary information um, to understand and assess like what you're going through. It There will always be curveballs, but knowing what you're getting into is going to be very helpful in the long run, because at least you have some kind of mental preparation. So to me, I think the gap is the portrayal in the media, and also I guess of the lack of people talking about their failures.
You mentioned, the stigma around failure, right? Versus actually learning from failure. So, why do you think there's this stigma in Southeast Asia about failure?
I think in Asia, or in Southeast Asia, we are still very Asian, right? Like we are only supposed to be good, to be, and there's a lot of face concern. So even somebody talk about their failures, it's almost like, people almost get shocked by it. Yeah. So I think it's just a mentality. Even like you're not supposed to fail in exam. You're not supposed to fail in school. You're not supposed to, So I think there's a lot of, I guess it's generational thinking and mindset in it. I mean, we always, publish stories about like how people make it, or, how somebody earn millions or cash out, but nobody talks about the thousands and thousands of people who have tried and failed, right? I think I think for me it's very interesting because you learn a lot from failures. I will say that my biggest lessons are from my failures, and I then my successes. I mean, the successes are always nice to have, you are proud of them, but the tough times and the times where your metal is tested, I think those are the times that will actually make you grow as an entrepreneur.
How should people change this culture around failure, right? Is it like, because it's kind of like, scary, right? Like to share about your own personal story of failure, tough times. I remember this person I was listening to, and he was like talking about his failure, and I told him, I said, "Oh, what did you learn and everything?" And then he was like, Jeremy, I frankly, the only reason I'm okay to talk about my failure now is because I just have a second success, and so now I'm okay to talk about my failure beforehand, right? And so he was like, "Yeah, I still haven't solved the problem yet, right? Because sometimes when people talk about failure, it's like I failed, but then I learned from my failure and then I succeeded, But nobody's very interested in the I failed and that's the end of the story kind of message."
No, actually, recently I listened to Justin Khan. I think he was talking about how he failed, and then Sophia Amoruso from Nasty Gal. I think they were talking about their experiences about raising lots of money and failing, right? I think for myself, I don't know, maybe I'm just not a very conventional Asian because I've never been brought up that way. But I had a very major spectacular failure when I was running the News Savvy. So basically, we were growing very rapidly, and we had a lot of. I mean, we were the third biggest personal finance site, and we were going for Series A. And I think I was talking to a few VCs, right? And what happened is, I'll give you a summary. So what happened is, uh, my website, the newsavvy.com, was actually hacked and we lost everything. So we had, I mean, my team then was, I think there were 12 of us, and we just lost everything. And we finally had a ransom email asking us for 30 Bitcoins, which is about, I think it was about 150,000 then. And obviously, I refused to pay the ransom. Uh, but it was 6 months of painful suffering. Basically, we had to scrape the internet, we had to find backups. It was very dramatic, and I always say that, this, what was worse for me is that I have to appear okay outside, and when people ask me, "Are you okay?" the only answer is yes, right? Like, what else can I say? I can't possibly break down, right? But every night I was drinking half a bottle of whiskey. I was just crying. I was just a mess. And then every morning I just have to turn up at work because, I see myself as a leader, right? And if I can't lead my team, then who's going to do it? And and I put the experience as, and because I was so inexperienced, I know nothing about tech. I know nothing about, cybersecurity. I just I felt a great deal of shame. Like, I should have known this. I should have known better. Why didn't I know better? If it was somebody else, this wouldn't have happened. And yeah, so it was really like, even though we rebuilt the site 3 months later, the following 3 months were even worse because I always say, if somebody comes to your house, tie you up and burn the house down, it's okay because you can rebuild the whole house, right? You can just grow up, build a new house. But the problem is now they only burn half of the house. So not only I have to fix the unburned part, I have to fix the burnt part. And that's worse. So, like, for example, my website was put on unsafe site for all the telecommunication company, telco companies, right? I have to call them and beg them and say, can you please put my website, take out my site from the unsafe website because it's not unsafe, it just got hit by a hacker. So things like that. And the thing is, I was really a mess all this time. I have to say that one thing that I learned though is that the tech community, the developers in Singapore are very, very sweet. They all help me. Some of them are strangers to me. I don't even know them, but they were all trying to help me resolve the issues night and day. And 1 year later, I realized. So during this time, I coped by writing, and I just wrote like about the ordeal. I wrote about how I suffered, what I feel, because I felt that that was the only way I can cope. 1 year later, so after this thing happened, I went back and I saw what I wrote, and I realized that after that 1 year, after I read the whole thing, I was still, at the end of it, I was crying. I was still in tears, and I realized I've never gotten it. It's like when you fail that badly, and when you put so much blame on yourself, and that, but you're still stretched to always run your business, to always, still perform, to always hit the metrics. You've never really dealt with the trauma. You've never really dealt with your own mistakes and acceptance of it, right? So what happened was, I actually wrote a very long essay about this, and I published it publicly. And I actually also said, like, you know what, it's very embarrassing for me because I'm admitting that I failed, right? As a leader, I am admitting that I failed my company. And to be fair, at that point of time, we don't have any other further successes, or it's not like we've never returned to those days. And um, so unlike your male guest, we've never had further successes to talk about it. I just wanted to write because I just feel that if I can't be honest about this, then I am not honest about my business, and I'm not honest to myself as about being an entrepreneur, because I feel that, on the media, or even on panels, or even on newspaper, or magazine, what you see is a very glamorous side of it. You always see the wins. You always see, oh, how fast you're growing, or a very polished version. But nobody sees the time where you're just sitting on the floor crying, thinking like, what the fuck is happening, man?
Yeah, what the fuck is happening? That's so true.
Yeah, I really sometimes I just ask myself like, I don't even want to get out of bed. Like, do I have to get out of bed now?
I know. I have had that feeling multiple times. Um, yeah. Wow. Thanks for sharing that. That's a really rough period of time. I have to ask, like, would you, knowing who you are now, because you're a stronger founder now, you've went through it, how would you have handled the situation differently?
Okay, I think the first thing I did after I published the article was to actually take a coding class. So now I can say that I kind of know how to code. I think if I look back, what I would have done differently is one, I will, okay, I will say that I think there's a lot of optimism. I think to a lot of people, there's a lot of optimism and slight arrogance. So when you start something, you're so in love with it that you tend not to have all the information, and that's okay, because I think as founders you always don't know what you don't know. But if I had to handle it differently, I think for me it will be going back and thinking before we do anything is to think what are our potential pitfalls. My ex-boyfriend then, who's also a tech founder, um, told me that only the paranoid survive, and I think that phrase have always stuck with me. So now I'm very paranoid, and what I look for whenever I start a new project or leading a team, whether it's in Gourmet Food Holdings or in New Savvy, is always to consider all the potential pitfalls we could have. I think that's one of the biggest thing that I learned, that I become a lot more considered. Um, if it was in the past, I'll just say, okay, you know what, we want to do this, let's go, let's do this. I don't care at what cost. Let's just try and do it, and we'll solve the problem as we walk along. But now I will say, okay, if you want to do this, what about A? What about B? What about C? Have you considered all these things? It doesn't have to be a long exercise, but it has to be a considered one. Actually, you know what? I've never realized that that's how it changed me until I speak to you about it. This podcast is it's like therapy.
Well, thank you for privileging me to be able to be part of this journey.
How about you? What were some of your failures, and what did it teach you?
One personal failure I talked about in the past. I think one failure, and I don't call it a failure per se, but one interesting thing was, I think, in junior college, long story short, I was at a good junior college. I was planning to become a medical researcher. Actually, I wanted to be a vaccine scientist. At a point of time, who knew 2020 would happen? Unfortunately, I think my first girlfriend passed away while I was in school. And it was obviously catastrophic for her family and her siblings and her parents. And also for me, I think I was just grieving, right? And I effectively pieced out from school, right, for the next 1 year. So I just did horribly. I was in the bottom 1% academically. And, because, I was just really not tuned in, just very much grieving. And obviously, I think everything that happened to the family was way worse. And obviously, it was way worse, for her as well. And I think for me, it was just very much like picking up the pieces and trying to figure out like whether to whether life was worth like pushing on in that sense. So I eventually went on to join national service, and spent a year running around in the jungle. And I think I always tell people, I was like, if you are ruminating a lot and just thinking a lot, the army is a good place because they don't want you to think, so they shout at you all the time. So you don't get to stay in bed. That's my dark humor side of it, right? Because you don't have any time to like think or dream or have nightmares. You're just too tired from the whole day to just go straight. Anyway, so it was a very regimented routine. But I think after a year, then I was very much like, okay, actually, it might be good to go to university, right? So for me, I think I picked up pieces. I decided that I would study my SATs instead of the A levels, because the SATs I heard were a little bit easier to study for. MCQ and all these other things. So I sat for my SATs in national service, right? And then I went out and applied to universities. I didn't have amazing teacher recommendation letters or anything either. So that's why I went to UC Berkeley, right? Because it's one of the few universities that don't require a recommendation letter from your teacher as well. So yeah, I remember like cutting up my SAT books and putting them in Ziploc bags so that I could carry them out into the mission. So that while everyone else is sleeping, I would spend half an hour just like reading the notes by torchlight, and my pencil, right? Just kind of, or pen, just kind of going through the stuff. So that was a tough time. So yeah, that was like I wouldn't say it was like it was just a really tough time for me, because it was like one part of it was just like grief, and obviously a lot of sorrow for her, and obviously still very intertwined with their family as well. And then obviously second part was just like crashing out of JC, so not having academic milestones like all my peers in that sense, and then also going to army without a university offers. That's another one. So yeah, so then kind of like picking it up and then eventually deciding to, hey, I deciding that I would go to university is one, and secondly studying for it, and I think thirdly, I think I had to. I think actually I was very avoidant with relationships for a long time as well in terms of commitment. So I actually had to unlearn that also as part of that process as well.
Well, that's really tough. I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, I know. It's tough for everybody, right? And I think one thing, kind of like in a similar theme about what new learnings when you're older. Now that I have a baby daughter who's like, 7 months old, I think a couple things, become clearer of me, right? I think one thing that became clear to me is like, one, like, obviously I was grieving as, the boyfriend, but I can't imagine how much worse it was for the parent, right? Because now I already love my baby daughter so much after 7 months. What's it like to like raise a kid for like, effectively 16 years, right? And then lose a child. It's like kind of like unimaginable to me, like, from my perspective. So I think there's a magnitude dynamic as well. And then I think the second thing also I kind of realized was like, at the time, I felt like my grief was very like unique in that sense as a single person, right? Because, you also, I think, at that age, you don't really get exposed to death too much, right? Obviously my grandma had passed away before, but, we were not very close and everything. Maybe a family friend had passed away, again, not very close. But now that, I'm middle aged, when I look back, I'm like, yeah, two of my classmates, right, have died, right, in school, right, that I know of personally and were relatively close to. They've passed away over the past 30-ish years. The school counselor who was working with me and helping me, I always thought she was very kind and understanding, but in retrospect, for her, she must have seen a death every year, right? At least not death, but, the seeing grief and be a grief counselor multiple times a year, right, for the school students, right? And the fact that, grief is so universal because everybody loses their parents one day, everybody loses a loved one day, right? And so I think one thing I realized is at least some grief is really a universal emotion, which I thought was very unique, and very private as a pain. But now that I'm starting to realize there's a little bit more universality, I think that's why I look at it. But it's a shared emotion, right, for so many folks. And yeah, that's something I do think about quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Jeremy, I think as I grow older, when I was younger, I think life humbles you, age humbles you. When I was young, I thought I was, I was ambitious, I was invincible, right? And then I had like my precancerous cells, which I had to actually go for surgeries. Now that I'm mid-30s, I think about losing my parents sometimes, and I it's like what you say, right? I can't even imagine the thought of it. It's just like when you think about your daughter, I can't even think about it. It's even too painful for me to think about. And I guess going back to the theme, it's also it makes you question a lot about your life, about what is important, right? Whether and I guess goes back to my advice where I think you can prepare for a lot of things, whether financially or not, because it gives meaning to me. Having financial security is actually giving. It's not about having a lot of money. It's not about showing off, about what you have, how many properties you have, or what car you drive. But it's about providing the kind of life that the people you love want, and to have the kind of life that you want. But I think on top of it, talking about shared grief, I guess I always think that we are not special, no matter how much we think we are, and and hence we should just live our life the way we want to, which is very non-Asian, by the way.
Asian versus non-Asian, right?
Yeah, because I think it's when so I when people ask me, when I go for interviews and people ask me what is your superpower, and I always say, and I actually really think this way. I think my superpower is always disappointing people. Like, I'm supposed to go to law school, didn't go to law school, went to a university that is almost unheard of at that point of time. I was supposed to go investment banking, got into investment banking and left after a few weeks because I just felt, you know what, the hourly pay rate is too low for me. I don't want to work like this. I don't want to waste my youth away. And then left banking at the height of my career, started a financial literacy side. So I think for me, I won't say that I'm brave, in the context of your podcast. I don't see myself as brave. I will say that it's a lot of stupidity. More like, I'm too stupid to know how hard it is. If I knew how hard it was, maybe I'll have thought about it more. But I think one thing that I have is I always knew what I like and what I don't like. And if I don't know, and most people know what they don't want to do. But I think we should all spend time exploring the things, more things in life, to know that what we really want to do, because we're going, especially for people our age, right? We're going to live a very long life, God willing. We are going to live to 90s. I mean, the average age expectancy for most of our peers will be 80 to 90 if there is no accidents, right? So I think we shouldn't be constrained by what is expected of us, but to actually, I think at this stage where we have a lot of resources at our disposal, the internet, different ways of making money, different ways of saving or making investments, we should actually look at our lives and think, what is the best and the bravest way I can live my life to the fullest? Sorry, I don't know why we are so sentimental in this podcast.
No, I mean, I think we're all in that reflection stage, right? I think we're starting to consolidate a lot of what we're thinking. And I think, I love to follow up what you said, right? Which is that you don't consider yourself particularly having been brave. And I'm just kind of curious if you reflect, have there been moments where you felt like you would say that it looks brave from the outside or that it was brave from the inside? Sometimes, people outside look at stuff and they're like, wow, that was very brave, right? And then all of us are inside are self-disqualifying and just like, oh, it wasn't brave. It was my responsibility. It was stupid. I didn't know the risk, So, there's a lot of, self-disqualification around bravery, right? But I'm just wondering from your perspective, have there been any moments where on reflection, I think you were brave?
I think for me will be again when I will say that my bravest moment always come from my toughest challenges. I think the one time that I was brave is not when I started the New Savvy, because when I started, it was really something I wanted to do to help people, and I think it was really lacking, right? Like, women are just not brought up to love finance, right? Or to actually be attuned to finances. But the bravest time where I think that I'm brave and other people think I'm brave is when we rebuilt the new savvy. Because at that point of time, I think this is about only 1.5 years after I left banking, I actually sat down in my crisis and sometimes drunken mess. I actually sat down to write, what can I do with my life? Do I want to continue this? Like, why the hell do I want to continue this? This is so tiring, right? And as I think as a founder, as an entrepreneur, you will notice that most of the time it looks okay, there's that 10% of the time where it looks glamorous, okay, and people call you, oh, you're the boss. But the truth is 90% of the time is very, very, very unglamorous. So when I sat down, I actually thought about returning to a banking job. I was thinking of doing digital innovation. So there were, I think I put down 18 things that I could be doing. One of it was to rebuild the new savvy. 17 of it was to walk away, and the 17 other choices were to walk away and to do different things, right? And honestly, if you wanted me to be honest, rebuilding the new savvy was the hardest choice, and it was the least financially rewarding, and was the least, I will say, any by any metrics, was the least of any markers of success. But I chose to actually rebuild the site because, and this is going to be sound a bit psychobabble, but it was because I really believed in the mission. I believed in what we were doing. I believed that we were actually changing people's lives and we were impacting people's lives. There were so many women who actually emailed me during those times saying, hey, what happened to your newsletter? I stopped receiving them all. They were saying, I'm very thankful for this because I've been in somewhat similar situation like you, and I really realized this is the time I need to sit up and watch my finances. So I think for me that was the bravest thing I did, that I chose the hardest path and to rebuild something that I believed in instead of caving in, choosing the easy way route of having a corporate job or even you know, like an easy way out. Yeah. I think for me that was very brave.
Wow. Thanks so much, Anna, for sharing all of this. And, one last quick question is, if you could travel back in time 10 years, right, to 2011, right, what advice would you give yourself back then?
10 years time. Hmm.
Well, 10 years ago, you were very, 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 like, just starting out, right? Is, in the you're just starting out in the finance industry.
Can I say buy Bitcoin? No, right?
A lot of people have said that. A lot of people have
What?
said buy Bitcoin or buy Apple.
I
Yeah.
know. I think I will say that, uh, okay, I think the advice I would give myself is to always equip myself with the relevant skills, but also be kind to myself. I know it sounds very cliche, but I think most founders are hardest on themselves. And I mean, I hang out with a lot of founders. To me, it's a form of, it's a support system, right? I hang out with a lot of female founders and with male founders, and sometimes I organize dinners. I used to organize monthly dinners called wining and dining, where we just wined and dine, because only founders understand the pain of another founder. um, so I think I will say that the most important thing is to actually really equip yourself with the relevant skills and be kind to yourself, but also have a support system. I think I wouldn't have gotten through this period if I don't have any support system. I think having a constant support system, having mentors to teach you, to guide you, is very important, and to always be humble, because no matter what you have achieved, some things are going to blow up and to explode next. So just be prepared.
Wow. Powerful. Yeah.
How about you? What advice will you give yourself other than buying Bitcoin?
2011. You beat me to the punch. All of us should have bought Bitcoin. I think 10 years ago, I think the advice I would give myself would be, I think at a time, I was, I had a plan and everything. I probably sat down with myself and just be like, hey, Jeremy, I think you have this plan for your life, and some of it is going to be better because you planned for it. And I think some of it, you're just going to be pleasantly surprised, and some of it, you're going to be unpleasantly surprised. So, keep the plan. I think it's good to have that, and just be, ready to have some equanimity, do some meditation, learn some, living in the moment, resilience skills, because, the plan is going to have to change, right? Or life is going to be very different, and you're just going to have to roll with it, both the very unpleasant surprises and also the very pleasant surprises. So I think that's the advice I would give myself.
That's a very good one. Thank you.
Yeah. And so thank you so much for coming on the show. I want to paraphrase the 3 big themes that I really got away from this. I think the first is, again, thank you so much for sharing, I think, your childhood story from, growing up in the context of the Indonesia crisis, as well as the Asian financial crisis and SARS, and, how those circumstances played some context and role for how you grew up and the motivation you had to focus on, financial reality and dynamics to focus for your family. And I think that was an amazing set of story in retrospect. And I really thank you for just kind of like zooming in and just showing how painful and tough it was from the inside at the ground floor, right? And how that led you to, join finance, but also eventually become a founder yourself. The second thing I really appreciated was you giving a lot of very savvy strategic and tactical advice for founders, especially around at one level, what is the financial / operating reality of being a founder with your own personal anecdotes versus, I think, the perception, right, and the glam nature of entrepreneurship that's in the culture today. And I think I really appreciate your good advice around how to be thinking about be a founder and how to do it in a way that's smart and savvy, in a way that makes sense for everybody, right? The last one, of course, is thank you so much for being so open about all the adversity and failure that you've encountered. And yeah, even though you said that, even though you say that you were just stupid, I just want to say that I thought you were very brave, because knowing how savvy you are now and how savvy you have been in the past about risk and failure and all the tough times, I know that you were brave, right? And you still pushed on multiple times. And I think that story about the fact that, you did so much writing, especially in the context of rebuilding the New Savvy, was a really personal and true story. And I appreciate you for being brave then and also being brave now to share that with other folks who could find it useful for their own adversity and journey.
Thank you for saying all those words. You're so sweet. And yeah, I learned a lot from you too, Jeremy. It was really good speaking to you.
Thank you so much, Anna.
Thank you. Have a good week Sunday with your family.
Thank you for listening to Brave. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share this episode with friends and colleagues. Sign up at www.jeremyau.com to discuss this episode with other community members in our forum. Stay well and stay brave.